Good afternoon, and I'm going to be giving you the OLAW perspective on social housing. I did want to again reiterate what was mentioned this morning. This is the third social housing symposium, and OLAW is very pleased to be involved with this symposium. The other organizers are USDA Animal Care, USDA AWIC, Johns Hopkins Center for Alternatives to Animal Testing, the Division of Comparative Medicine and Pathobiology. And as I said, our wonderful sponsors and vendors that have also been supporting the program today. And Division of Veterinary Resources at NIH is now represented because Eric has moved from Hopkins to NIH. So we all really want you all to engaged here. This activity, the way this really works so well is that you hear these wonderful presentations in the morning, and then in the afternoon we have breakout sessions where you really get down and dirty about what you're doing at your program, what happens here stays here, doesn't go anywhere outside the rooms, and I really encourage you all to take advantage of the opportunity to engage with the different people that are presenting in the morning for both today and tomorrow. Okay, I've said my piece there. We're going to move on. So how does NIH get involved in all this? Well, if you're receiving funds from NIH, the PHS policy is applicable. And that's this little blue book here that you see up on the slide. So if you're receiving those funds, your institution is required to follow that policy. And one of the things in the policy, it says you got to follow the Animal Welfare Act if it's applicable. So if you've got regulated species, you need to make sure that you're following the Animal Welfare Act regulations. And when Carol was mentioning federal funding agencies, you have to have records available. That's where this kind of overlaps, where if we were coming to do a site visit of you, we would also be looking at any of your records that were related to the Animal Welfare Act also, just to be up to speed that you're in compliance with the regulations. The PHS policy also says that you have to follow the guide for the care and use of laboratory animals. The most recent edition is shown there, the 8th edition. Institutions must base their programs on the guide. So now I'm going to focus on what does the guide say about social housing. A lot of it is very similar to what we have heard that's in the regulations, with a few special exceptions, a few more details there, especially for the species that are not regulated by the Animal Welfare Act. So the guide starts off by saying that best housing meets an animal's physical, physiologic, and behavioral needs. So that's how we want to start, that we want to make sure that what we're doing for those animals is meeting all of their needs, and then in particular, that it's also accounting for their social needs. So that's what we're starting from here. The guide says that they should be housed in stable pairs or groups of compatible individuals, unless there's certain exceptions. And those exceptions are similar to what we heard in the regulations. Experimental reasons justified to the satisfaction of the IACUC, or because of social incompatibility or another veterinary indication. What about aquatics? Well, here's where we have a little bit different things to look at, and we're going to have presentations tomorrow about aquatic species. The guide says that for social housing of aquatics, that whenever possible, there should be social housing of social aquatic species, and that enrichment should be encouraged, although at the time the guide was written, there wasn't a lot in the literature that they could focus on to present information about enrichment concepts, and basically encouraging institutions to do that research and publish it so that it will help the greater community. But in general, that enrichment should be appropriate for the species in terms of enhancing their behaviors, and also hopefully be safe for the animals and the people using it. Guide also has some specific recommendations when it comes to African clawed frogs. Encouraging the use of visual barriers, hides, and shading, because there is some literature out there showing that this keeps the animals more genteel and getting less excited. So that is a specific recommendation in the guide for that particular species. It also talks about semi-aquatic reptiles, which I think are not that typical in most research facilities, but when they are being used, it's recommending that they have both a wet and dry environment to allow for all of their normal behaviors throughout their life cycle. So, more about social housing, single housing. What does the guide say? There's, again, these specific exceptions that as long as it's justified based on experimental needs to the satisfaction of the IACUC, you can have an exception from social housing animals, or if there's veterinary-related concerns. The guide has a specific list of exceptions, and these are, again, very similar to what we saw in the regulations. Animals that are overly aggressive, animals that are debilitated, those should, of course, be considered for exclusion from social housing. When there's a risk of contagious disease transmission, either research-related or as part of a quarantine program, there certainly may be reasons why you need to singly house animals. Although, as we've heard, there's more options that people have done the research. They've been able to show that you can have paired animals in quarantine. You can have socially housed animals for lots of different circumstances, as we heard from Kelly today, and that's always going to be the better situation whenever it can be worked out. Again, incompatibility, pretty straightforward. Other veterinary reasons as indicated, and then if it is an experimental need, it should be strongly scientifically justified. Historically, we used to see when we were doing site visits where we'd start looking at protocols and we'd just see this standard statement that the PI would put in protocol after protocol saying, I can't socially house them because I never have done it before, pretty much was the justification. That won't fly anymore, gang. So just putting you on notice that those scientific justifications, if we're taking a look at them, we're going to call you on it if we think that it's weak and that the IACUC's not doing its due diligence. So, and we have done that. So, and usually when an institution gets the sense that we have enough serious concern about their social housing program, they turn themselves around because it really does have a potential impact on their funding. So, okay. Hopefully you're not too scared now. I think all of you, because you're here, you're not the problems. I absolutely sure that. And I commend you because you are here, you're learning, you're sharing. That's the whole intent. Okay. So, if it is necessary to house animals singly, the guide gives some suggestions. The shortest duration possible. If they're going to be in a small enclosure, give them a chance to get out and move around into a bigger enclosure. Consider having them housed for periods of time singly when they have to be, and then put them into pair housing or extended periods wherever you can make it work, as I said, and offering additional enrichment items. These are all part of what the guide's suggesting on how you can still do right by the animal when you do have to singly house them for specific purposes. The guide also talks about that if you have to have an animal in the absence of other animals, do more, have an interaction with the animal care staff, similar to what the Animal Welfare Act is talking about, this idea that we can still do social interaction with the animal by having them be able to visualize other animals, have companion animals in the room that they have an affiliation with, and whenever possible, giving them more things to do with additional enrichment items. So, social stress. As we've heard, the guide also is pretty explicit about the fact that not all animals are going to be compatible and may not all fit into a social group, and the risks that go along with when you are pair or group housing animals, that there is a stress period during that. Some animals that never quite adapt would be in a chronic stress state. You need to be aware of that. And then the risk for injury and possible death. All there, but we have to get over our risk-averse situation, our fear of what could happen, and really look at the practical ways that we can address it to prevent it. And as we heard from the speakers this morning, there's different approaches to take. The training and the engagement of the staff can really go a long way to establishing the best environment for the animals. Recognizing, too, that because of social hierarchies that occur within the different species, you can have antagonistic interactions. How you address those and how you do your best to prevent the most serious things from going on, that really goes a long way to having a stable situation for the animals. So, a lot of this you've probably have already heard about. Again, that you want to monitor for social stability. It's not just once and done, throw them in the cage and walk away. Of course, that would be unrealistic. If there's ongoing aggression, that you're going to potentially have to separate the animals. The timeout idea is really great. I loved hearing about that today. Just like we have to do with our kids, we do that with our monkeys. So. If the strain or sex is known to habitually have problems, create a performance standard within your program. This is more likely going to be applied to rodents, where we know that certain strains, the males of certain strains, have a tendency to be really aggressive fighters. So you may have to have a performance standard where you're identifying which strains, which particular groups of animals may have to have more intensive monitoring or special ways of housing them to keep them from having serious injury. Again, engaging the IACUC with this kind of program is very important, and along the way, keeping them informed too. Again, we have to recognize the risk that we take when we socially house animals, and also when do we pull the plug on it and say this animal's just never going to find its right partner. It does happen on occasion, but you have to balance the whole situation too. Maybe 2 weeks later, a new animal will join your facility, and you'll have love at first sight when those two animals see each other. So some of the challenges that we've heard about a lot over the years that we continue to see where programs are finding solutions to, but I just want to put these here because we know that these are more challenging than just the standard kind of situations with large breeding colonies, okay? Certain species are more challenging. Certain types of animals are more challenging. Adult rabbits, although we're going to hear a little more about that tomorrow, I believe. Macaques, we've heard a lot about today. African green monkeys, we've heard that some programs have had quite good success and others not. Baboons also have their fair share of challenges, and male swine, which we will hear about tomorrow. When animals are jacketed, we already heard somebody talking about that this morning, that, hey, you can work around this. You can figure things out. Head caps, another one that traditionally 15, 20 years ago, people would just say, hey, I can't socially house my animals. They've got head caps. But we've moved beyond that. Food and fluid restriction also. Improvements in the way that we handle these animals, the equipment that's available, it's making it more and more doable. Again, we have to always look at why has an animal been exempted? Is it truly because you've given up on that animal? Can you readdress it at a later time? Always it's important to document this so that you can go back and look at what maybe there were certain triggers that you didn't notice at the time, and go back and look at the records and see if there's other attempts that you can make. To possibly make improvements to your program, or also to how an individual animal is handled. Contrary to common belief, these are some of the things that we also have heard about where institutions have shown us their success stories, where they have paired primates with head caps and the actual grooming between the animals actually improves the health of the head caps, so without an incidence of dislodged caps. Male rabbits that have been successfully housed as young animals, and then when placed in the proper environment with shelters and site blocks, escape areas, that they've been successfully co-housed. And as we've heard a lot today, adult macaques that have been successfully housed with either juvenile animals or with finding compatible partners. And the last note is that training is paramount. Having your staff who are engaged, committed, excited about being there because they are making a difference in the animals' lives. You just can't get around that. And the guide, of course, emphasizes that too, that the staff should be trained to recognize the behavior and biology of the species that they're working with and how they can impact and affect the enrichment that is being provided to those animals, and also be part of identifying adverse or abnormal behaviors. Lots of resources out there. I'm not going to go into detail about these. We do have a link on our website to all of the past social housing symposia. The presentations that were videotaped are available from our website, but also the AWIC website, which is the primary location for all of the past social housing symposia. We also have links to a lot of other resources if you haven't taken a look at the OLAW website, and there's certainly lots and lots of more material coming out every day. So thank you very much.